Hey, um, let's get started. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So the topic of today's session is Reimagine IT operations with AI. My name is Fern Reyes. I'm a ServiceNow developer, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. As a disclaimer to participants, we are recording this session. As we go through, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those to the Q&A, and closed captions are also available to turn on. So I'm joined here today by Nia Evron, Marlon Bromfield, and Gifford Box. AI has the potential to transform enterprise platforms like ServiceNow, but many organizations are still struggling with the basics. Today's session is about how organizations can stabilize and optimize their platforms, and why that's the foundation for unlocking real value from IT and automation. So before we get started, let's meet our speakers, starting with Nia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nia Evron. I lead the AI strategy and go-to-market for UK and Ireland at ServiceNow. I've been at ServiceNow for about a year and a half now, and before that, I was at Microsoft for 10 years. I spend my time working with a lot of organizations, discussing their AI ambitions and business outcomes that they want to reach to using AI.
Go to Marlon next.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marlon Bromfield. I'm the ServiceNow Practice Director at Sopra Steria. I've spent nearly 30 years working across public and private sector, customer, partner, and vendor side, and have also had the opportunity to work directly at ServiceNow across EMEA and ran the channel in UKI and led some of the largest transformations across the platform. The team's focus is helping organizations unlock value from the platform, and like Fern said, getting the foundations right and using AI responsibly, and naturally scaling through managed services. For those of you who are not familiar, Sopra Steria is a leading European technology and consulting organization specializing in digital transformation, with 51,000 employees across nearly 30 countries. But a bit closer to home, in the UK, we work cross-sector and have some of the largest joint ventures in the UK. From a practice perspective, we're an elite ServiceNow partner and best-in-class rating for ServiceNow by the analyst pack. And we've actually won the ServiceNow Public Sector Partner of the Year last year. But of course, we work extensively in private sector as well. Thank you.
And finally, we go to Gifford.
Good afternoon, I'm Gifford Box, and I'm Head of Managed Services within the ServiceNow practice at Sopra Steria. And I find myself in a bit of a unique position in that I was responsible for the build of one of our core platforms that I now manage. So having built the platform and migrated 20 different client accounts across to ServiceNow, I now manage the platform. So I've been on the journey that some people might be reluctant to go on, and I've seen some of the challenges along the way too.
Thank you. So let's start with where organizations want to get to. Going first to Nia, AI is creating a lot of excitement. What outcomes are organizations ultimately aiming for when they think about AI on enterprise platforms?
So here's the thing. It's really interesting to see what's happening in the market now. On the one side, we have these amazing advancements coming from the frontier labs like Anthropic or OpenAI and Google. The models, I don't know if you guys are following, but from February this year, we have seen a step change in what these frontier models can do in terms of reasoning, unsupervised work that they can do akin to hours of work of humans. They can generate codes. They can do a lot of stuff, but yet most organizations are finding themselves with generic AI systems that can maybe provide some advice. The real benefit of this thing and where organizations are looking to go and what we're seeing they're doing in the platform is for real business benefits. So we were speaking, I was with AstraZeneca last week. They're telling us public information that they want to drive 20 new life-saving drugs into the market. What does that mean from an organization perspective? That they need to divert any cost saving that they can find into R&D to develop these drugs. Now, how are they going to do that? One of the main areas where they have a lot of inefficiencies is how they run the IT service management and operations. Hundreds of thousands of incidents, tens of thousands of IT changes, millions of alerts going into the system. A lot of that stuff is done manually. If we can harness AI agents to work on behalf of humans and potentially autonomously resolve the very simple stuff, the level 1 service desk stuff, or collect information, help humans understand what is going on when they're trying to resolve something, we can gain huge efficiency gains. Speaking to a bank, their efficiency target for IT was to drive 20% efficiency gains in year, right? Doing something like that without AI is virtually impossible. You're going to reach, your limits of automation very, very quickly. So taking away the manual work from people, giving employees time back, and potentially also servicing more with an existing workforce. That is what organizations are trying to do today.
So that's the AI destination, but most organizations aren't there yet. So coming to Marlon, if the outcomes are so compelling, why do so many organizations struggle to turn AI ambition into real results?
I think it's a great question, and it's a conundrum that the industry's facing for sure. But certainly what we see is most organizations struggle, not because the technology doesn't work. And just thinking about what Nir just said, there's so many different examples of where we're seeing that innovation and R&D in the market, but because everything around it isn't quite ready. So starting with, say, for example, let's use AI instead of a clear business outcome and the customer at the heart. What we do know is most organizations, the data is the crown jewels and the lifeblood of every organization, but it's obviously often messy, siloed, and of bad quality. And the roadmap's unclear. Technical debt and application sprawl piles up. And Nir will know this because ServiceNow, interestingly, sort of commonly talk about this 367 applications that most organizations tend to have and have to navigate. So that messy middle, if you like. And if we're honest, in reality, most organizations tend to be 2 to 3 releases behind. Projects get stuck at demo stage. Proof of values never really go live. And we hear that more and more across industry. But I think most importantly, it's the people. Our teams don't have the skills or confidence to use it properly. And if we just sort of reflect for a moment, how many of us in our personal lives really leverage AI with confidence beyond the simple prompts we see in ChatGPT, Copilot to, reframe an email, and more recently Claude. And we've, again, Nir's spoken about the Anthropic disruption that is clear to see across the market. And we see that in a lot of the impact on the stock market around a lot of the SaaS solutions. And as employees, we maybe resist or ignore it through fear, right? But what we do know is humans in the loop who work with AI will be the winners. So in summary, then what my perspective is, AI success isn't about the model. It's about having the right data, ethics. So we need to look at the bias and predictions around that, people engagement, coupled with strong governance.
So when you looked underneath all of those challenges, and it often comes back to the state of the platform. So, Gifford, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, a lot of organizations do get real value out of ServiceNow, but the platform is so powerful that foundational issues can quietly pile up, and then that causes everything to slow down, and we see some common patterns. So firstly, how are the platform support teams resourced? Some can be underskilled or overstretched, but ServiceNow skills are specialized, and organizations can underestimate what's needed. Sometimes only a few administrators maintain the platform, or there might be limited architecture expertise, and developers may be learning the new service capabilities as they go because they're coming out so quickly. And this can result in inconsistent implementation patterns and risky customizations, and that slows delivery improvements. So let's not forget that ServiceNow isn't just one workflow, it's hundreds of products. If we use an analogy, if you buy a new car, you wouldn't try to service it yourself, you'd take it to a mechanic. But yeah, we see organizations buy enterprise platforms and then try to build them, run them, and evolve them in-house with not necessarily the right skills. A small in-house team can't realistically be expected to know all the expertise across IT, HR, CSM, and beyond that. So I think one of the biggest challenges for organizations is that they don't have the necessary skills, or they struggle to retain them because good people are in huge demand, and we see a lot of movement of people to partners or vendors, and without that deep expertise on the platform can slowly drift and customization creeps in, upgrades get harder, and we create technical debt. And technical debt is another significant problem that we see too. So this tends to be where teams have customized platforms early on, often to replicate legacy processes. So the number of times, and again, I've seen this in the delivery of one of our core platforms, the number of times throughout the build of that platform, the organization would say, well, we want it how we've already got it on our existing system. And over time, that creates so much technical debt. It can lead to delays of upgrades or even skipping upgrades. And this holds organizations back because you then miss new capabilities and performance improvements. And every change then just becomes slower and high risk. But this can be improved through better platform governance. And without a strong governance model, everyone ends up building things in a slightly different way, in their own way. And the platform then becomes messy, fragmented, harder to maintain, and teams struggle to reuse those existing capabilities. So one of the key things is to drive that best practice to enforce architecture standards and development patterns. Then if we think about data, if the quality of your data within your CMDB is poor, such as incomplete or inaccurate configuration items, or multiple discovery tools creating duplicates, or service maps that don't really reflect reality, this can lead to bad decisions, bad analysis, incorrect incident prioritization, for example. And AI raises the stakes there. If your data or your knowledge and your governance aren't right, then switching on AI introduces a real risk. And that's why the governance has to come first. So I think to sort of tie this up then, it's important to remember that ServiceNow isn't just an IT tool, it's a product. And as Marlon said, without a product roadmap or a platform owner accountable for value, features are built for individual teams or individual purposes instead of scalable functions. And decision making can be slow and strategy not clear for expansion. And one of the biggest missed opportunities is when ServiceNow is implemented in those silos. IT uses ITSM, HR might use a different system over here, facilities might be using a spreadsheet or emails. And this results in broken end-to-end workflows and manual handoffs between the different teams. So instead of maximizing the workflow platform that's been invested in some cases, it can just become another ticketing tool.
Yeah. So speaking about the governance, the experience, that's exactly why so many organizations turn to managed services. So I'd like to point the next question to Marlon and Gifford. Why do organizations struggle to manage these platforms themselves? And how does the managed service actually help?
So I'll start. I think managed services is like Gifford said, is complex, and it's more than just support. It's an organizational commitment. So if you think about all of these end-to-end workflows, it moves beyond the tooling, like we said. And not to sort of labor the point, it is all about having the right skills at the right time. And we know the talent pool is, very, very competitive. Clear ownership of the roadmap, and that goes across business and technology. And there's also a business change element to this as well, which is really, really important to recognize. We talk about governance. Governance is the play. You can think about things like the AI control tower, and I'm talking about the technology, but how do you govern all of this new tech that's being introduced within the organization? And of course, continuous improvement, because without that, you're not going to keep the customer happy and you're not going to get the CSATs that you need. So all of those things culminate in you driving value for the platform to ensure retention, long-term success, and obviously alignment into the strategy. As part of our managed services, bringing it a bit close to home in terms of Sopra Steria, we remove the strain of managing a complex platform. And let's be honest, and I'm sure Nir will attest to this, but ServiceNow is powerful, but it's also very, very complex. I think you only have to look at the capability map, which has evolved constantly over the years. The license model can be perceived to be complicated. And if you've been in the industry a long time, you probably can navigate that better than others. And the challenge, which Gifford, alluded to earlier, is it's highly customizable, the platform, which is great, but at the same time, that allows you to get out of the box very, very quickly. And then you can't keep in tune with some of the standards that you need to be able to support upgrades, etc. And there's so much R&D constantly, which is fantastic. And the acquisitions and the fact that obviously the platform, everything gets natively built, which obviously has a number of benefits as opposed to some of the competitors within this space. But new capability like Workflow Data Fabric, the AI Control Tower, RaptorDB, MoveWorks being the new AI front door, Vasa now in terms of looking at identity and security, and Armis based on the whole cyber play. These are all really, really powerful capabilities, but how does a customer navigate this? How do you keep pace? How do you understand that? And how do you, more importantly, translate that into something that's meaningful for your business? And then we move on to now autonomous AI agents. And Gifford talked about it earlier, just in terms of making sure that, you're acting on the right data set, especially at critical times if you have, major incidents. So all of these things are really, really important, and making sure we align with a lot of the data models and industry standards. So I think from a managed service provider perspective, let us take care of all of those complexities so you can, as a customer, focus on your core business and achieving the right ROI and platform investment And obviously, just in terms of what's been invested within the platform, just making sure you can be justified to your stakeholders that have invested in that. And there is obviously an ROI associated with that. So how do we do it? I'm going to pass you over to Gifford now to take you into a bit more detail.
So thank you, Mona. So we'd start with stabilizing and maturing operations. So let's go back to basics. We can take ownership of the routine platform and operational tasks so that internal teams can focus on their business and their strategy and getting the best value out of their investment. This reduces operational noise and prevents the internal IT teams from spending most of their time firefighting. And with the introduction of the service management practices and aligning workflows with best practice and ITIL models, it results in more predictable service delivery and clearer accountability. Platforms like ServiceNow require ongoing tuning to stay performant and maintainable, and that's what we do. We provide the platform health checks, technical debt reduction. We plan and perform the timely upgrades, and we review the configurations as well to make sure we're not putting over customization into the platform. Performance optimization is really key in the platform, and it helps organizations stay current with releases and avoid that drift into complexity and customization. But as Marlon said, it's not just about maintenance. We've got to include continuous improvement. And we'd assess what a continuous improvement backlog would look like for you, the customer. We'd consider automating high volume manual tasks that perhaps internal teams haven't had time to implement. We'd look at streamlining approval workflows and even auto ticket routing and categorization, introducing more self-service and virtual agents. So instead of just maintaining the environment, the service evolves and improves over time too. And with that, we'd reduce ticket volumes and mean time to resolution as well. And that's what brings us together with ServiceNow today as an elite partner. That shared belief that the platform should continuously deliver value and not just be switched on. And by doing so, we help minimize the challenges when it comes to renewal because the value is already clear. But as we've said already, we've got to have the right people, the right resources. ServiceNow niche skills, and we provide access to those specialists, whether that's technical architects, developers, automation engineers, continuous improvement, service improvement consultants. For many organizations, access to these expertise would be too expensive or too difficult to hire internally. And that's where we come in. We've done it to ourselves, to our own managed service contracts. And the example of the platform I built, in under a year, we migrated 20 client accounts from their previous platform to ServiceNow. Clients from across public, private, finance, and health sectors. Clients that require resources to have different levels of security clearance as well. And we can arrange that. So we really are living what we breathe.
Amazing. That was a really good breakdown. Thank you to Marlon and Gifford. So the managed services comes in and the platform stable and well run. So what actually changes from this point? And I'd like to come to Near here and also Marlon. Once the platform foundations are right, what outcomes can organizations start to see?
Right. So when I speak to customers of ServiceNow, so organizations that want to benefit from these efficiency gains I was describing earlier at the beginning of the conversation, there's actually a really interesting dynamic that we see with people. So a lot of organizations are driven by the need to show to the market that they are using AI in their business, right? So although this is not driven by value, and I'll come to value in a second, we shouldn't underestimate how powerful this need is for the leadership of any organization. So that'll drive decision makers to want to execute AI in ServiceNow and outside ServiceNow. It's a generic statement that I'm making. It'll drive people to want to go and get quick results in the platform. So that's number one. The second dynamic that we're seeing is there is, I've given you a couple of examples from AstraZeneca, from a bank I'm working with, in fact, two multinational banks that I'm working with, utility company, energy company that I'm working with. All of them are saying the same thing. We are under pressure to find cost saving in our department. The bank that I mentioned, I can't mention the name because they haven't agreed, but they said, we need to find efficiency gains. I was speaking to procurement. They manage something like 4,000 contracts across procurement, and they said the amount of manual labor, and by the way, the workflows around the life cycle of the contract are run on ServiceNow. And they said to me the amount of manual work that we have to put in to manage these contracts is humongous. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of hours of employees assessing risk in contracts, managing supplier performance against the contract, calculating penalties, legal conversations, and so on and so on and so on. If they could use AI in the platform, it would save a huge amount of time for them, and they can actually reduce the amount of people that deal with these contracts and repurpose them for more value work. So we're looking at organizations that want to do these things. Sometimes the approach that they're trying to take is, okay, we have teams of engineers, developers, let's go and try and build that outside the platform. The bank tried to do that. The initial analysis that they've done was that it's going to take them 1 year. We looked at the use cases. We said to them, we can develop the first one in a few weeks, definitely not a year. So there's a huge value of doing this in the platform. If we go back to IT, we see a typical journey for IT organizations, starting from the simple stuff. Can we deflect incidents from the service desk? Number one, right? ServiceNow just acquired MoveWorks. For those who haven't seen the product, it is amazing. It really is a very, very good reasoning engine. It is excellent at providing answers, synthesized AI answered, very similar to ChatGPT or Claude, but based on your corporate knowledge base that is stored in ServiceNow or external sources like SharePoint, whatever. So if employees need answers or need to perform simple tasks like, choose a catalog item or, whatever simple task that they need to do, MoveWorks is great because it'll do the job, it'll do it quickly in a conversational way with a very clean UI, and the case or the incident never goes to the service desk. That's number one. Second is once the incident, there is an incident and the fulfiller needs to be involved. How do we help the fulfiller to be way more productive? And this is the direction of travel, we think about Horizon 3, where we want to end up is an autonomous organization. Our own ServiceNow IT team, we call them Now, very catchy name. They told us, and they tell any customers that they will meet, we want to completely eliminate human touch in our L1 service desk. It will all be done by agent, and the timeline that they have for that is 2027. by 2027, I don't know when in 2027, we are going to completely automate level 1 service desk. This is why we created the autonomous workforce, which is designed to perform the function of a human level 1 service desk. And it also has the capability of, escalating it to a human level 2 or whatever needs to be done. So, but what I'm describing here is a target, not where you start. So like I said, we start with deflecting. We move to simple agentic cases like, supporting triage, which is about, if we look at the whole cycle of resolving an incident, it's about 30%. So can we reduce amount of time it takes to triage by 50%, 60%? It's possible with the AI agents. Can we then use AI agents to help with resolution plans? And then we move to the more complex stuff like triaging alerts, scheduling changes, assessing change quality. There's the engineering teams in our platform have produced about 150 agentic workflows that are built with multiple each one of them will be multiple agentic AI workflow. So we have a lot of them out of the box to resolve common problems, and we see our customers using them all the time. What is your journey and how you're going to drive value out of these technologies is something that you can discuss with the likes of Sopra Steria or with ServiceNow, and they will help you to define your specific journey given the ambitions that you have. But I can't stress enough what the guys were talking about here. We see a lot of customers that, remember I spoke to you about the drive to deploy AI quickly. If the platform is not ready for that, you're gonna be stopped very, very quickly with your ambitions. So laying the foundations doesn't have to be a huge amount of work, but laying the foundations is really, really important, and ignoring that might bite you in the bum long term.
Yeah, and just building on what you said then, yeah, that's exactly what we see. So there's an ambition to get there quickly, but we almost need to just make sure that when we talk about speed to value and this idea, which we call internally that sort of idea to invoice, how do we actually make sure a customer is getting the maximum value from the platform? We spend a lot of time ensuring the foundations are correct. Back to the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, right? We just need to make sure that that is correct, because that gets you to the scalable automation, which you touch on. And then back to the people, ultimately that the expectation is we start off in IT, which we tend to do and have that CIO type conversation. But Gifford alluded to it earlier in terms of we do a lot of work in the HR space as well. So having those CHRO conversations, getting into, you touched on financial services, working through an operational resilience type conversation for a lot of our financial services banking customers that we have, making sure we can build on the data and then get into a risk conversation, which is really interesting, right? Because most customers are focused on the IT capability, but the reality, then we start to talk about risk personas, impact tolerances, mapping out your important business services. And these are all the types of conversations we're having at Sopra Steria with our customers. And then we start to think about how we ideate across different revenue streams. Then, how can we take that data and then push it out into a more B2C, B2P, B2B type scenario for the customer? And then we're very much in that commercial space with the platform. And I think that's the power, right? We're actually showing our customer base that if you get those foundations right, you can start to then open up all sorts of different conversations. And I think, you talk. It was a fascinating conversation to have with a customer like that in terms of what they're looking to do within the market. And at Sopra Steria, we're having similar conversations that kind of really, really open up the power of the platform. And I think that's super, super important. So just to summarize, that's all about, making sure you're collaborating with your managed service partner, decreasing your risk, and making sure you've got the right governance in place. And then actually you can start to ideate across all sorts of different parts of the enterprise. So yeah, that would be my perspective on that.
Great, thank you. So, just before we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of our speakers for one piece of advice. So, what's a practical first step that organizations can take towards this journey?
Shall I go first?
Yeah,
Yes, please.
yeah. Why
Good.
not?
Okay. All right. So it's difficult to know where to start. And I find sometimes these conversations are based on an anecdotal evidence, right? Someone had an experience yesterday and that's top of mind for today. And that's where they want to start, maybe because they want to solve a problem that is, fresh in their head. We do better if we, and because ServiceNow is a platform, there is an advantage there. You have a lot of data that the platform records about the business processes that you run in the platform. Doing an analysis, and we can talk about the tools to do that. There's a lot of tools, and ServiceNow is now developing tools that you can, free tools that you can install in the platform. Definitely in a dev environment, not in production. But if you can clone production data and do the analysis there, the tool will enable to provide you with a view of what are the processes that are inefficient. So as an example, someone showed me an example, a real example from a customer. If you know that 40% of the reach outs to IT service desk is done through phone, through telephony, then maybe the ServiceNow voice agents are a good place to start, because you can reduce the amount of calls that humans have to answer to, and AI can take the rest. Or if you find that it takes 3 days to fulfill an employee request, or that you have 2 days of ping pong between resolver teams because someone didn't triage properly, it gives you an example of what is not going well, and you can then make decisions about which agentic AI workflow you're going to attach to that. Now, in the same tool, so if we're doing a data-based approach, the same tool will also automatically suggest which agentic workflows you should be considering, and it'll also attempt to give you an understanding of what is the cost benefit that you will enjoy if you go and execute on that. So in a long-winded way, what I'm trying to say is use the platform data to make decisions rather than based on anecdotal evidence.
Lovely. Thank you. So, if I go to Marlon next.
Yeah, I mean, from a practical perspective, I think for us, we've got capability we can come and demonstrate fairly quickly in terms of assessments we would run, and we'd want to do that with the customer. So that would be a practical next step from our perspective, because like building on what Nir just said in terms of anecdotal, how do we prove it quickly? And we do that often. So that's something we'd want to definitely look to do. And actually, let's just keep it simple. Start a conversation. What you find is most of this stuff, you can bring it to life fairly quickly. We can share our industry expertise from a practice perspective. We've got people that have worked customer side, platform owners within the industry. So we've got a wealth of experience that we can bring to bear very, very quickly. So we'd want the opportunity to kind of showcase that and have that conversation with who's on the call. So I think from my perspective, that would be a call to action that I would definitely want to see. And just lastly, I think we recognize the attrition challenge that a lot of the industry is having in terms of talent, and we can help you accelerate that. So I think that's one thing to call out.
Thank you, Marlon. And then finally, if we come to Gifford.
Thank you. So I'd say that the real value of managed services isn't just reduced costs, it's operational maturity. And we can move organizations from that reactive support to proactive service management and automated operations, but with a responsible mindset. So thing I'll finish with, if you allow us to be the experts in your platform, it'll allow you to focus on being the experts in your business.
So,
Absolutely.
just before we wrap up, looks like at the moment the Q&A is empty. We'd just like to give the opportunity to anyone watching to ask any questions in the Q&A.
I suppose for Nair, it's obviously people will have the opportunity to contact us post the session, right?
Definitely. So if we don't have any questions at the moment, that's everything from us. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. I'd like to thank my speakers as well. So Nia, Marlon and Gifford. That was a really interesting session. And I don't know about everyone else, but I definitely learned some interesting things and capabilities of AI as well. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.